I want to ask you to talk about contracts. I mean, talk about complexity. That blows my mind that these student athletes are now going to have to be considering legal implications that could impact them for the rest of their lives. You know, if they lose all their money, which they won't if they're getting properly educated, but you can always go out and get another job. You can always go out and get, you know, make more money somewhere. You just have to work hard. Contracts can straddle you for the rest of your life if you're not careful.
Yeah, listen, I hope we all have another few hours to sit here and listen to contracts. But I'll try to condense it as briefly as possible. But I mean, this is it, right? I mean, contracts, every aspect of DDMC that we've talked about is important, obviously. And I think that, you know, when you get down to kind of brass tacks, right, money and student athletes' ability to understand and manage money, and contracts, the ability to understand what it is that you're putting pen to paper to sign your name to, are just so critically important for them to understand. So contracts. When I think about teaching contracts to student athletes and to athletic administrators to understand what these endorsement contracts look like, to understand what these advisor contracts look like, it's not to make the user, if you will, the student athlete or the athletic administrator or the parents or the family sports lawyers. It's not to make them experts in this, but it's to help them understand things that areas that could absolutely be areas where they could be taken advantage of, where the student athlete might be taken advantage of. Because you're right, Courtney. I mean, you really could be, you know, kind of saddled with a bad contract for a long period of time if you don't know exactly what it is that you're signing. So let's think about what this looks like, right? Let's talk first about these contracts with advisors or agents. Now, I'll say as a disclaimer, we don't know exactly what the regulatory regime is going to look like when it comes to the NCAA rules on this, right? We don't know if there will be a third-party administrator kind of overseeing some of these things or not. But regardless, you still should know what it is that you're signing. Every athlete should know that. And I bring up athletic administrators very intentionally because at the end of the day, people who work in the athletic department, from student athlete development to the counselors and academic counselors to coaching staff, etc., you really are the frontline people that a student athlete is going to go to. So if they have a question about something, you already know they come to you first. And so this idea of education, all of the things that we talk about, it's for the student athlete, but it's also critically important that those who the athlete turn to most frequently fully understand these things as well. So when we think about these contracts for advisors or agents, first and foremost, when I think about a college student athlete signing on to an agreement, I'd want to know the term. How long are they signing on for? So let me give you some background before I dig into that a little bit. So I'm a sports lawyer. I work with professional athletes. I review these agent agreements all the time. And we consistently have people who get referred to us who have signed an agreement with an agent that they then want to get out of. And that's one of the first things that we look at, term and termination. How long is this contract, you know, in place for? And how can you terminate the contract? What does it take for you to get out of that contract? Those two pieces are critically important because that allows for the flexibility of that athlete to be able to move away from someone that they don't necessarily click with, align with, trust, or want to continue to work with. I mean, let's think about this, right? We're talking about 18, 19, 20, 21, 22-year-olds who are, you know, in a position where maybe they've never had, you know, a job before, right? Or they've never gone through an interview process or themselves even, right, to be hired for something, but now they're going to be hiring someone else. So we talked about this due diligence process, the first line screening that Courtney talked about earlier, but ultimately now you're going to be signing an agreement with this advisor. Now, the advisor may have all the best intentions in the world, and they may be a qualified advisor to be able to do these things, but what's important is that there's an understanding to be able to say, how can I get out of this if we just don't click? If we just don't seem to like get along, can I get out of this contract? And when you're in college, if you sign a contract that's you know, whatever, a 4 or 5 year contract, right? And you're a freshman, like you're locked in. you don't have the ability to get out unless the termination provision allows for you to do that with a certain period of notice. I mean, without going into a deep legal analysis, if we look at the Zion Williamson lawsuit with Prime Sports Marketing, it's all public information as their court filings. You can look and see a contract that is, the term and termination are absolutely not in favor of the student athlete. And so that's where we have to be really careful. They need to understand how long they're signing for and how can they get out of the contract. They also have to understand the scope and understanding what services are is the agent or the advisor providing. How much are they charging, right? Most people would say that the industry average is 20% that a marketing agent is going to get, but helping a player to understand that and understand kind of what that means, and to realize that even though the industry average or the industry norm is 20%, doesn't mean that's what you have to agree to. If you have the leverage to negotiate, then you might be able to negotiate 10% or 12.5% or less. So again, all of this DDMC that we talk about is how do we empower, right? You empower through education, and it's all about educating these athletes to make informed decisions. But there's also this ongoing monitoring that has to happen with these advisors. Are they doing what they're supposed to do? Do you have the rights? Do you have the rights in the agreements you have with them to get reports back on a monthly basis, a quarterly basis of the deals that they've acquired for you, the payouts, etc., right? So that you have that ability to have oversight over what's supposed to be happening. And then ultimately, again, talking about a young person here, potentially firing an advisor or an agent. And what does that process look like? How do you do that? And more importantly, how do you do that within the limits of the contract? And if the contract calls for 15 days, prior written notice, or 30 days prior written notice, or what have you, to terminate, that the athlete understands that they can't just send, leave a voicemail or be like, hey, I'm not working with you anymore, or send a DM in Instagram like, hey, I'm going with somebody else. Like, you've signed a legal contract. You have to really understand how do you, uphold your end of that contract as well. So you need to understand it. That's with advisors and agents, but there's also this aspect of the contracts that you would sign with the actual brand that you're working with, or whatever the marketing opportunity is, whether it's a speaking engagement, a marketing, an endorsement type of deal, anything that you're going to sign where you're going to get compensated. Again, the player needs to understand that contract as well. Now, I'll let you in on a little secret that I think a lot of people know, but it's not often articulated. The players and the agents typically, this is generalization, but in my experience, they typically care about two things. How much are they getting paid, and what do they have to do for that amount of money, right? That's what they care most about. But there's so much more that goes into that they really need to understand. And so when an agent tells a player, hey, I found this deal for you, you just need to, do this and you'll get paid X, and just sign here, that is not in the best interest of the player. The player needs to really understand the totality of that contract. So yes, the scope of services is important. So I need to send X number of tweets or social media posts, Instagram posts, with me using this product or wearing this product. Okay, great. But now let's also talk about what's required from a disclosure perspective by the FTC when it comes to promotion. Whose responsibility is that to have those disclaimers, appropriately included, right? Is the brand going to provide that to the player, or is the player going to have to, talk to the agent or figure it out themselves, right? So that should be included in that scope of services and more details as to the social media side of things. Compensation. They need to understand what they're getting paid and how they're getting paid, right? And is it going to be something that gets paid directly to the player, and then the player, the gross amount, and the player has to send that percentage on to their agent, or does everything go to the agent and then the agent takes their fee and then sends that to the player? The player needs to understand this. They need to understand how the mechanics work, and deals are all different. And so understanding these contracts can help them then lead them to more informed decisions. They need to understand the intellectual property and the protections that they have. They need to understand things like indemnification, which is something that most folks don't even think about. But if they're on the set filming a commercial or a photo shoot, and a light fixture wasn't properly secured and it falls and hurts them, who can they go after? Because I see a lot of contracts that say that only in the instances of gross negligence or willful misconduct can the talent go after the brand. But if somebody at the brand or their contractor negligently put together the light fixture, and it wasn't intentional, it wasn't gross negligence, it was just basic negligence, they had a duty to secure it and they did it, well, then the players should still have the rights to go after them for that. And so it's just a matter of understanding all that goes into it. And then finally, you know, for those types of agreements, what happens at the end of it? What happens when I have done the services that you've asked me to do? Does that automatically terminate the contract? Is there any type of ongoing, you know, lingering aspects of that contract that I need to understand? What happens if I want to terminate the contract? If I want to get out of it early, I realize that it's taking more time than I thought, and I listened to Courtney's time management presentation, and now I'm trying to figure out, I might need to get out of this. Do I have the ability to do that? And what would it take to do that? So again, you know, I'm just barely even brushing the surface, but when we talk to these athletes about this, most college athletes have never seen an endorsement deal. They've never seen, Courtney, one of these deals that they're going to sign, because I see it at the pro level. And so when they transition to the pros, and the first time they see an endorsement deal, they have no idea what it is that they're signing. They just know that it's a lot of words on a bunch of pages, and they're looking for the dollar sign, but they need to understand so much more. And if we really are focused on protecting athletes and really focused on making sure that they can make informed decisions, they have to understand these contracts, and being able to show them redacted versions of real endorsement contracts is an easy way to engage them in the conversation so that they can ultimately learn a little bit more about what their experience is going to be like when we move into a name, image, and likeness environment. So again, that's what it looks like from these advisor and endorsement deal contracts. And then lastly, it's just thinking, to your point, Courtney, when you talked earlier about the due diligence of all the team that's around them, whether it's a lawyer or an accountant or an advisor or an agent or what have you, what are those agreements that those individuals are asking you to sign, making sure that you understand them and your responsibilities before you sign them. So a lot to get into in contracts, but what's important to remember is what you sign your name to is everything. And so you've got to make sure that you're making an informed decision.